Hello friends, tonight we're taking a look at the FN509 Tactical, another brown plastic striker fired pistol in 9mm. And yes, I know, a couple of months ago when I reviewed the Glock 19, I said it was gonna be a long time before I reviewed another black or brown plastic striker fired 9mm pistol. But my point in that video was they've gotten so good that they're all pretty much the same, right? Like the VP9, the PPQ, the Glock 19, the P10C, they're all so awesome. Hell, I would actually put the Janik on that list too. They're all so awesome that you can just choose one based on, I don't know, how they look or whatever trigger you like best or the way the grip feels to you, because they all work really, really well now. Anything in that tier is just an outstanding gun that's gonna do the job for you, right? Well, the point of that video was that the things in that class are just not worth reviewing anymore. And you know, I thought this gun was gonna be one of those. It looks like it should be, right? It's made by FN. FN's a great manufacturer. It looks pretty cool, right? It's brown and plastic. Like we expect that to work pretty well, right? This was an MHS submission after all. So I thought this was worth talking about. This is very interesting to me. A gun that I almost by default would have put on that list, because look at it. You know, it's fantastic. It's not made in Europe, but it's all European-y. It looks like it could have been made in Europe, right? But it doesn't make the cut. It's got a lot of problems. You know, failures to feed being the big problem. That's the biggest one. But it's also, it's got a bunch of small problems that snowball into bigger problems the longer you use the gun. And those are interesting in their own right. Also though, this gun is made right here in Columbia, South Carolina. I was really hoping this would not suck. And the gun has some amazing features. It just doesn't do the getting the bullets out of it every time part that you need a gun to do. It doesn't do that part as well as it should. And that's really disappointing. But all right, let's look at the details. Let's start the show.
Ejection is really weak. It's really quite weak. No more malfunctions. Something weird happened with the trigger reset. I like it, but the ejection is super weak, and that was some weird stuff that was happening. I had some kind of trigger reset malfunction and then a stovepipe. So I don't know. Makarov, 25 yards, 6-inch plates. Let's see if I can actually do it.
Tonight we're taking a look at the FN 509 Tactical, a gun that can best be described as pretty okay. It is remarkable in its mediocrity. And FN, I'm so sorry. I truly love you. You make so many guns that I adore. And these are made right down the road from me. But my God, this gun is so just meh. And it's even worse because it has a few features that I truly love. These sights? Yeah, they're awesome. Some of the best around. The slide release? Excellent. This plate system on top? Absolutely killer. But it's just not enough. It's not enough. The trigger is, it's straight up bad. The gun is not particularly reliable. The grip texture sucks. And everything about this gun is about twice as expensive as it should be, from the gun itself to the magazines. For the prices they charge, these fucking magazines, they should just jump right the fuck out of the gun when they're empty, shout to a buddy, and then the full one just better climb right the fuck out of the pouch of my arm and into the gun. Even then, I would still feel slightly ripped off, like I had overpaid. This sort of outrageous pricing is bad enough when it's HK or, sometimes CZ, but this gun is made right here in Columbia, South Carolina. That's not a bad thing. I love Columbia. I'm a fucking townie, to be sure. But these ain't Columbia prices. And part of having something made here is to keep costs down over something made in, let's say, Belgium, a place where the gene pool has lifeguards and they've never heard of 3D Doritos. All right, I'll stop. We're not even in the review yet, and I'm already doing bits and getting off topic. It's not a good sign, is it? And yes, I said after the Glock 19 review, and probably the review before that, I said that I was done reviewing black or brown plastic 9mm pistols because I had nothing new to say. Well, with the 509, again, there's something new to say. Fucking get off my dick about it, all right? In the Glock 19 Gen 5 video, I talked about how black plastic striker fire guns have gotten so good, there's barely any difference between them. So who cares which one you get? I said that my criteria for that gun is it cool? And if yes, the gun you want to buy is cool, then it's a great gun and you should buy it. We know that it's going to be great, so who cares? Get the one that you want to fuck the most. You fuck that gun, you take it home. I guess it probably needs to be the other way around if you don't want to end up on some kind of list that probably keeps you from owning guns. And then you have to notify your neighbors anytime you move, that a known gun fucker is in the area, I guess. And you can't rent a place within 200 yards of a Cabela's. That would be tough. So take the gun home first, then fuck it. Take it from your old pal TGP Kids. That's the kind of sage wisdom that you come to this channel for. But if a gun isn't built to the same high standard as most of what's on the market, we can't just ask, does it look cool? So which guns do I consider to be in that sort of top tier of sameness? Good question, rhetorical voice in my head. Well, we've got Walther, Glock, Beretta, CZ, HK, and probably SIG, though I'm not totally sure yet. And surprisingly, I think Janik might deserve a place on that list. But I haven't shot mine quite enough to say definitively yet. Those are all great guns. The VP9, the PPQ, the P10C, the Glock 19. Though none of those are perfect guns, and they all have problems, they're very solid, and I can recommend those without hesitation. But whichever one feels best to you, that's the one you should buy. I've had some problems with some of those, but they were, in the big picture, very minor. Parts break sometimes, shit like that. They all have good triggers, good grips, mag releases, it's all good. My point is that in 2022, we have this recipe dialed in. We know how to design a very comfortable grip. You may not like the Glock, for instance, but I think all of these guns on my list feel pretty damn excellent. We know how to make a good trigger. All of these guns have great triggers, for striker-fired guns, be they pre-cocked, like the PPQ, or only partially so, like the Glock. We know how much texturing we need on the grip, what a good grip angle is. We have that figured out. We know how much undercut we need beneath the trigger guard, and we know what to expect at a certain price point. The 509 is not fit to be counted among these others. That's a harsh statement. I know. I don't want it to be true. I want everything made here in sunny Columbia, South Carolina to be the best, or at least among the best. South Carolina is, to me, the best state in the country. I want everything here to succeed, but this gun is just not as good as it should be, and it's not as good as the other things on my list. It's also not as good as this one, which costs half of what this costs almost. And okay, Yes, this is the tactical model. Of course, it's more expensive. Even then, it's still outrageously priced. A sort of equivalent P10C is about $520. The FN is almost $400 more. The FN is being sold for the same money as something like this. But it doesn't function as well as something like this. They aren't in the same league. And actually, I think this might be a bit cheaper these days. I haven't looked in a while. The standard optics ready 509 is on average selling for about $700, $100 more than a regular ass MOS Glock. The Glock is better in almost every way that counts. You know, I normally don't discuss pricing much on this channel because it fluctuates, but I do think it matters a great deal in the case of this review. So it hurts to be this brutal, but I have to be. It's the only way to do this review the right way. So we're going to talk about what went wrong. But before we do, if you enjoy my awful work, please consider supporting me on Patreon. Your generosity grants you access to the TGP Discord, a wretched cabin of breadsticks and olive oil. Your support keeps the channel going and gives me the freedom to say what I want to say. Without my patrons, none of this would be possible. And you can also help the channel out a great deal by liking and subscribing. I really appreciate it. Oh yeah, and before I forget, this gun was FN's MHS submission. It didn't win the contract. I wonder why. Hate when the audio has to get fucking split up like that, but that's okay. That's, you know, that's why we do what we do. It's quality. It's for the people. It's quality. It's quality. Got a pile of guns over here on the floor. Okay. Features. The FN 509 Tactical is a polymer-framed, striker-fired pistol chambered in 9mm parabellum. Striker-fired means that rather than having a hammer that strikes the firing pin, like this, setting off the primer, a spring-loaded striker is released when the trigger is pulled, striking the primer. It strikes the primer, so it's a striker. The striker is the firing pin. Think about it that way. The FN 509 seems to have a partially cocked striker system. With striker-fired guns, there are often partially cocked systems or fully cocked. The former seems to be more common than the latter. The Glock is the most classic example of the partially cocked striker, just like our friend here, the FN 509. When the gun cycles, the striker isn't fully pulled rearward into its final cocked position. Instead, when you pull the trigger, you are pulling the striker back the rest of the way until it reaches the fully cocked position, and then as you pull, eventually, the striker releases. You can really feel it on the Glock. Right now we're pulling the striker to the rear, and when we pull the trigger all the way back, we release the striker. Same thing happens here. That releases the striker. The CZP-10C, another partially cocked system. You can see that. Right now we're pulling the striker rearward and then letting it go. So yeah, that resistance there that we're feeling is from pulling that striker to the rear. It's a double action, like any other double action pull, although, you know, very light and pleasant in the case of the Glock and the CZ, or gritty and rough in the case of the FN. The CZ and the Glock have a sort of rolling break that I find very pleasant and easy to shoot well. There's not a sort of defined break like you would get with a traditional single action pull like this HK45. Very well defined wall. The Walther PPQ, the P99, and the Janik, they all use the same system based on the P99. These have a pre-cocked striker. After the action cycles, the striker is left in the fully cocked position. And then when we pull the trigger, all we're doing is releasing the striker. On the P99 and the Janik, you can see when the striker is cocked. Kind of protrudes there at the back. And you can see it move in the double action mode. And that's when the striker isn't pre-cocked at all. And then here, it is cocked. When I pull the trigger on a gun with a fully pre-cocked striker, there is some take-up, but then I hit a very firm wall, just like with a traditional single-action trigger pull. You know, like on the HK45 that we looked at, or something like a 1911 or a Beretta 92, that sort of thing. And as a result, the PPQ and the P99, they probably have the best striker-fired triggers anywhere. They are absurdly good. Very light and crisp and short with super fast resets. Let's look at that reset. So crisp. That's just ridiculous. Let's look at the Janik too, because it's excellent also. So this is the Janik, and again, we can see that the back of the striker protruding here at the rear. So crisp. Same super short reset. We don't have the double action functionality with the Janik, but that's okay. These are such a good value. I mean, damn near unbeatable for the money. And so people endlessly debate the safety merits of each system. I'm not going to do that here. I would happily rely on any of these. They're all excellent, but do make sure you choose the right one for your skill and comfort levels. You know, like the PPQ has a super light trigger. Not everybody might be comfortable with that. And then other people might not be comfortable with the extra complexity of the Walther P99, although I think that's very useful because I love a double action, single action hammer fire gun. So for me, the P99 is fantastic. And you know, the Janik is bought often as a starter pistol, but that's a super light trigger. So just make sure you're paying attention there. Make sure you're being careful with that. So the 509, it feels strange. Instead of the rolling brake we expect from a Glock or the CZ, the 509 has a wall after you move the striker rearward, a very stiff, firm wall. It's odd. This is clearly meant to make the trigger better in the eyes of most shooters, but it makes an already gritty and nasty trigger feel very, very slow. But enough about the trigger. We're going to talk about how that impacts performance in great detail, but we needed to mention it a bit here. It's just, it's quite remarkable. So on to some of the other important details. The FN 509 Tactical has a threaded 4.5-inch cold hammer forged stainless steel barrel. The rifling is traditional lands and grooves rather than polygonal. The barrel's thread pitch is the usual 1/2 by 28 that we like to see in the US. That's awesome. The barrel and slide length is shorter than some full-size pistols, meaning this is more like the Glock 19X or the Glock 45 than the Glock 17. This gun weighs 27.9 ounces and ships with these 24-round magazines. I think you get 2 of these and one standard 17-rounder. That's a hair more weight than its competitors, but I don't think that's really enough to matter. The slide release is ambidextrous, as is the magazine release. Both of those feel really, really nice. The grip has a very coarse texturing, and lots of it. It's very knobbly and rounded. Here on the front strap, it isn't very deep, and again, not very sharp. The Glock's texturing is less grippy, but much sharper and much better in every way. And then the P10C's grip is grippier still. That sharpness can really help. This gun has a very unique and useful optics cut. Though you can't see it right now, it is cut for optics. The rear sight that you're seeing here is actually a plate. You can see that looking at the top. You unscrew these Allen screws and take this plate off, and it reveals an optics cut. But more remarkably, it also reveals a rear dovetail for a rear sight that co-witnesses with the optic. That is an excellent system. I really, really like it. It's one of the things that immediately caught my attention about this gun. And all of these sights are tritium night sights. I'll get some better photos to insert. So let's take the gun apart and look inside. This gun, due to the ongoing ammo shortage, has a measly 800 rounds through it. I'm sorry that that's all I could put through it, but that's the best I can do these days. That's the best I'm likely going to be able to do for quite a while with new guns. Things are getting better on the ammo front, but it's still tough. All right, so first, unscrew the thread protector here. Then lock the gun open. Obviously, you would make sure that the gun is clear before you do any of this, but that goes without saying, I would hope. Pull the mag, rotate this lever down, like so. Release the striker by pulling the trigger, which, you know, that kind of sucks, but a lot of guns are like that. We can't fault the FN for that. And then let's take a look inside. Wow, it's awfully dirty, isn't it? I know someone's going to ask, and yes, I have tried both of the recoil springs to alleviate the reliability problems. This gun comes with a... By the way, I was taking that barrel out very slowly because you don't ever want to just rake the threads across the slide. You can really damage the threads. So I always do that very slowly and gently when I'm pulling the barrel out. Always a wise move, in my opinion. All right, so let's look at the wear here. The slide is holding up very well. Normally on a Glock, you would see a lot more wear at this point. A lot of the Gen 5 Glocks, the finish gets really, really chippy in there where the barrel rides. This isn't doing that at all. This is really holding up well. Other than the filth, there's really not much to say there. Let's look at the barrel. Yeah, that's not excessive wear either. I wonder why the hood of the barrel is angled like that and not straight. Either way, it's doing fine. Yeah, that's about the amount of wear that I would expect to see. Nothing too crazy. It's a ballpark in line with its peers. There's our recoil spring. Let's look at the frame and see if there's any abnormal wear there. There's not going to be, but all the same. Well, everything looks great. Looks totally normal. I'm probably not in any way in frame. You know, that's why I always include pictures, because I can't see what you're seeing. So probably just waggling this fucker all over the place. Yeah, looks fine. All right, and so to put it back together, we're going to very gently insert the barrel again to make sure we don't damage the threads. Very gently. Because that would suck. It would suck to mess those up. All right, recoil spring back in. Put it back on, then lock it open. It's the easiest way that I can find to reassemble it. Flip that back up, and you're good to go. Put our thread protector back on here. So this gun comes with 2 recoil springs, like I said. One is the standard spring, and then there's a stiffer spring for shooting with a can on. I don't remember which one I have installed right now, but it doesn't matter because I did an experiment after the reliability problem started where I just swapped springs to see if that made any difference, and it did not. We had weak ejection, failures to feed. It didn't matter. So I just left whichever one is in there. So everything looks good inside. We've got minimal finish wear to this cool bronze coating. I usually hate brown guns, but this actually looks pretty cool to me. I kind of dig it. A few people have made videos on the trigger grittiness and how to fix it, you know, without putting in an aftermarket trigger. Seeing the way it operates, I think it probably just is gritty. The trigger mechanism is kind of complicated for a striker fired gun. There's a fucking ball bearing in there, for Christ's sake. You know, I'm kind of kidding. It's not that complicated, but there is more going on in there than there needs to be. There are so many points that it could be causing kind of a weird pull. That take up pulls the striker rearward, and then the brake releases it. But there's so much shit in there touching other shit. It's hard to know what exactly is causing it. I have a feeling, based on where the grittiness is, I think one of the big things is probably just the striker channel itself. I think the striker is kind of dragging in there, and that's what we're feeling. I think that's what that specific thing is right there that you can both see and feel and hear. You know, it's not like Glock where we know after decades and decades what all the friction points are and how to deal with them. So anyway, it's all back together. Let's talk about how it performs. That's what most of you are here for anyway, right?
It is just limply dropping those out of there. Well, it locked open that time, so that's something. It's doing better. Maybe it needed to break in. No, it's doing that thing. There's some kind of problem with the trigger reset. It's done that a couple times. also so hot now I can barely hold it. Why did I close that? Now I'm gonna have to. Good times.
Performance. This gun has not been particularly reliable, nor does it jam constantly, per se. I have a 1911 that jams more than fish after 5 tabs of acid. This isn't that bad. It jams more like Tom Petty. Like not all the time, but it does jam. You know, I've had 4 failures now in 800 rounds. That's not unusably bad, but it's pretty fucking awful. Compared to its peers, that's just terrible. Polymer frame striker fired guns are so reliable these days, it's more remarkable to find one that malfunctions 4 times in 800 rounds than to find one that doesn't jam. In fact, it's been a very long time since I've tested something new that had these sorts of problems. It's been years. And don't fucking tell me that it's breaking in. You know, the Walthers didn't need to break in, the HKs, the Glocks, the Janics, the CZs, those things just function. And don't tell me I have the wrong spring in the gun. I followed the directions, and then when it didn't work, I said, fuck the directions, let's try some other things, and that didn't work either. And don't tell me I didn't lube it enough. It really bothers a few of you that my guns aren't lubed up for an anal scene 100% of the time. There's plenty of lube on this gun. When the gun had a problem, I was quite wet with lube at the time. You can see it in the video when we looked inside the gun. Ejection is consistently weak regardless of ammo type, regardless of magazine, regardless of recoil spring, regardless of wetness, regardless of weather, and regardless of the gun's astrology. I'm going to keep shooting it, but so far this gun is just not very reliable compared to its peers. Compared to them, I'll just say it's not reliable at all. So what were the malfunctions? Well, 1 was a stovepipe, which you saw on camera, and 2 were failures to feed. And then there's been some other weird trigger reset stuff that I can't exactly tell what's happening, so I'm not listing that here because I haven't sorted it out. And if I don't know the direct cause of something, I don't like to put it in a video because what if it's me? You know, we can't rule out the fact that, you're listening to me right now. I'm a fucking idiot. So we can't rule out that I'm somehow inducing that. I don't think I am, but this thing keeps coming up where sometimes the trigger kind of hangs and doesn't reset all the way. But the others, we've got the stovepipe and 3 failures to feed. And one time one of the trigger incidents felt like maybe the gun hadn't fully gone into battery. But again, I didn't have it on film and I didn't stop to look at what was happening. I just, bashed the gun with my hand and kept shooting. And that's a bad habit that I have. I was taught to clear malfunctions as fast as you can and get back to shooting. And that's great when you're practicing, but not always great for videos. So sometimes I miss things. Okay, so, all of that's not great. But the weird thing is I kind of like the gun despite it being quite mediocre. So I'm going to keep testing it. Maybe these things will change. Maybe in this particular case, a break-in period will actually do some good for the gun. So I'm gonna keep going with this thing. So we'll see what happens. It hasn't broken any parts or anything, so that's good. That's usually what happens to me. So that's I'm gonna keep rolling with it. All right, so we're talking about the bad stuff. Let's keep going with that list. The trigger sucks. We talked about that a little bit. It's really, really bad. Let's look and talk about exactly what makes it so bad. So on their website, FN says the trigger pull weight is 5.5 to 7.7 pounds. That's quite a fucking variance, isn't it? There's always variation from one gun to the next with any manufacturer, but not 2 fucking pounds usually. Mine's sort of in the middle. To me, it feels like it's about 6 pounds and some change. Okay, so the take up is super gritty and creaky. Let's listen here. I'm gonna hold it up to the microphone so you can enjoy this. Yeah, very, very creaky. That's okay. It's more that gritty feel that bothers me. It's just very strange. And believe it or not, as I've shot it, it's actually smoothed out some. It was a lot worse before. This thing just kind of jerks along. 6-stage trigger. Just what the shooting world needs. The take-up is you using the sear to push the striker rearward. And then you hit this wall, somewhat firm, quite heavy. And then the trigger breaks. The sear releases the striker, sending it forward. Let's look at the reset. The reset is actually pretty good, and it places your finger right at the break point again with the striker pulled back. But then you realize also that wall isn't as firm as you thought it was. Let's look at that. See that? That's a wall. It's also really creaky and weird. You just normally don't notice unless you're riding the reset, because you're pulling so hard rearward against the wall that it just pushes through all the rest of the stuff. So I don't know. It's you tell me how much that matters to you. Maybe it doesn't matter at all. But then you just get to be disappointed all over again. So in the year 2022, with all these other outstanding striker-fired triggers, we have this thing, this creaky, heavy, weird piece of shit. It's just strange. This trigger is just, it's kind of funny. We know how to make a good trigger. You didn't need to do this, FN. And then I remember we make them locally. So I feel compelled to just yell out my window and hope an FN employee hears me. All right. So next up, the grip texture sucks. The bumpy little bits are big and bulbous. And the grip feels abnormally thick. Like it was made for a larger caliber, frankly. But the big bumpy bits, they're all rounded over. So they don't actually grip your hand that well. And then the ones on the front, they're so shallow and rounded, they don't do much of anything. Almost every other striker-fired gun has a better grip texture than this. The only exception is like the things based on the Walther system. Those have worse texture, I guess. The P99, you really got to put Talon grips on that, and the Janik is pretty slick too. But literally everything else on the market. The Glock has way better texture. The P10C, way better texture. The VP9, way better texture. I don't know about the Springfield. I'm not. That gun repulses me to the point that I'm not even gonna hold one to look at the texture. I'm not doing it. Somebody else do it and tell me what it's like. Okay, so that was the bad. There's actually kind of a lot of good. The barrel is excellent. The quality is amazing. The magazine release is amazing. I love the texture. I love the way it feels. It's easy to use, and there's one on both sides. The slide release, also excellent. I hate how a lot of the European 9mm pistols have this huge slide release lever that I always hit with my thumb, preventing the gun from locking open. So this to me is the perfect size. It's bigger and easier to get to than the Glock, but it's not so crazy like the P30 where I'm going to prevent this thing from locking open. So that's nice. And then the slide release has got this little fence around it. So you're also, you can't sort of accidentally mess with that either from the other side. Really, really nice. You're not going to accidentally lock the gun open any more than you're accidentally going to keep it from locking open. But my favorite thing about the gun, oh man, it's the optics mounting system and this sight plate. This top plate has a fantastic rear sight on it, protected by this superfluous but very cool looking set of metal wings. I love these sights. These are some of my favorite sights ever. And I haven't even bothered to mount an optic on this gun yet because I love the sights so much and I don't want to take them off. The front sight is big and easy to see, and the rear is blacked out other than tritium vials. These are great sights. I shoot them fast. I really like them. Okay, so this gun has some problems. Other than the reliability problems, how does it all come together? That's what frustrates me. In a world of excellent guns, very similar to this one, this gun is almost excellent if it ran correctly and had just even a decent trigger. I'm not expecting greatness here, just a medium trigger and had better grip texturing. This would be one of my favorites. At the very least, I'd really, really like it, but it doesn't have those things. However, I still shoot it quite well. In the moment when you're actually using it, other than the reliability problems, these other things don't seem to actually hamper my shooting performance that much. I shoot it accurately despite the trigger. Really, my performance kind of surprised me. It wasn't too far off from its competitors, but that just makes me all the more irked that these problems exist, right? And once my hands got sweaty, I really noticed that grip texture. I can't get the purchase on this gun that I'd like to get. We're so close to greatness with this thing. And now also, I'm not one to complain about bore axis usually, but this gun does have a higher bore axis than some of the others. And when you combine that with the grip, and my hands are getting slippy, well, once my hands get sweaty, I notice that I feel a bit more muzzle flip with this gun. That's not the case with dry hands, but just this gun needs work. It needs some serious work. Final thoughts. This sucks. I'd love to tell you that my locally produced pistol is amazing. As amazing as my awesome city is, as glorious as the glorious state I call home, but I can't tell you that. Instead, this pistol is almost great, but not really. Instead, it's a mediocre pistol at a high price point produced to a very high standard, remarkably. It's too bad that the core design just isn't good enough. This one needed more time in the design phase, more testing, and maybe a few more iterations before going to market. It's just not ready. There's a reason this gun wasn't chosen during the MHS program. It's not good enough. Compared to the Glock with its familiar trigger, great texturing, and awesome reliability, or the reliability and amazing grip and trigger of the PPQ or the P10C's outstanding grip, the 509 just can't compete. I struggle to think of who I would recommend this gun to. Maybe this is for the shooter who already has one of everything else and wants a cool suppressor host for the range where reliability doesn't matter. That's kind of all I got. So I present to you a plastic pistol review worth doing. The story of a gun that just doesn't cut it. So that was the FN 509. Disappointing, right? Yeah, it's very disappointing. Imagine how you would feel if this gun was made in your town, the place that you love. We were so close, Columbia, South Carolina, to having an amazing 9mm pistol made right here, and then we fucked it up. It's a damn shame. This pistol wants to be great. It just needs a lot more development time, or maybe not even a lot. You know, I don't know shit about what firearms development is like. Maybe it doesn't. Like maybe it's right on the precipice of being a great gun. Maybe it just needed 6 more months. All the same, I don't know why it was released in the state that it's in. So reliability problems aside, let's imagine for a moment that's just my gun, although I've seen other reliability problems online in the examples that other folks have. Let's say this gun works perfectly. It still doesn't change the fact that there are a lot of other guns on the market that are cheaper, yet have better triggers, are cheaper, and have better grip texturing. None of that stuff is changed by the gun working correctly. There would still be room for improvement here. You know, I love the optic system. That's fantastic. But if all the development time went into the optic system and they didn't focus on, you know, the gun actually going boom boom when you need it to, then what was that worth? It doesn't do you any good if the gun doesn't work. So anyway, I'm just going on and on about it because I really wanted this gun to be fantastic, and it's just not. So maybe we'll see another generation of these down the line, although realistically, that's not going to be what happens. They're going to do what they always do. Every 5 or 6 years, they just ditch their main pistol line altogether and just completely put out something new, rather than doing what they should do and iterating on the 509. The only exception seems to be the 5.7, which they inexplicably kept around for decades, even though they knew it had some problems, and only now are they releasing an updated version of the 5.7. Anyhow, thank you so much for watching. I hope you all have a wonderful evening, and I'll talk to you soon. Good night.